Hey there, this is Sadie Lockhart, the Community Engagement Manager of Mission Forward. Thanks so much for listening today. And now, a word from the folks who made today's episode possible, the Johnson Foundation at Wingspread. When connection feels harder than ever, division is easy, but progress isn't. The Johnson Foundation at Wingspread brings people together at their historic Frank Lloyd Wright Design campus to convene leaders, communities, and changemakers to tackle today's toughest challenges. From community-centered initiatives to private retreats and executive gatherings, Wingspread is where dialogue turns into action and vision becomes reality. Discover the power of convening at johnsonfdn.org or wingspread.com. That's johnsonfdn.org or wingspread.com. And now, on to the show.
We talk a lot about leadership, but presence, that's where the real work happens.
Hi, and thanks for joining us for this episode of the Mission Forward podcast. I am so glad to be with you, right where you are, wherever that is right now, listening to this show about presence and community. As you know, we are in the early stages of this 11th season, in which we are talking about hellos, goodbyes, and that space between. That space where we can be present with each other, with our family, with our coworkers, and with our neighbors. And today's guest is someone who practices this really well. And the local newsroom that she runs, well, they practice it really well too. We are talking with Lisa Snowden, editor-in-chief of Baltimore Beat, and one of the great minds behind this newsroom's radical focus on community first. You might recall that I wrote about Baltimore Beat earlier this summer and their beat boxes, which bridge community in a brilliant way. We're going to talk about that, about how to bridge community, how to bring people together, and why, from Lisa's perspective, local news is not dying, but is the heartbeat of a strong community. Lisa, welcome to Mission Forward.
Thank you so much. Thank you for such a beautiful introduction.
My pleasure. I'm so thrilled to have you here. So I've got to ask you, right? You are a journalist, so I know you have got a fair share of good stories to tell. But I'm going to start by having you tell us one of yours. So take me back, if you can, to the beginnings of Baltimore Beat, right? When it was just an idea. And I have heard that you set out to build something different in the Beat from the ground up. So tell me a little bit about that vision and what inspired it.
Sure. So the Baltimore Beat came out of the death of Baltimore City paper. That was an alt weekly that was in Baltimore City for around 40 years. It's actually 40 years exactly. And I was hired toward the end of its run. I was also hired post the death of Freddie Gray. And if you don't recall, about 10 years ago, Freddie Gray was a young Black man in Baltimore City. Police picked him up, threw him in a police van. He was severely injured, ended up dying from those injuries, and that set off unrest in the city of Baltimore. The staff at Baltimore City paper was really interested in telling a story from the ground up, from telling it from the real people on the streets, especially thinking about the people that are most affected, which is Black Baltimoreans. At the same time, they realized while they were trying to do this work, they looked around at themselves as a staff and were like, hey, we're trying to tell this and we don't even really represent Baltimore. We're a mostly white staff. So they did their best at that time. When they got a chance to make a new hire, they asked me to come on as, I think, just a news reporter. At that point, I was a freelance writer. I was mostly home with my kids and was freelancing also. They brought me on and we really started talking a lot about, again, serving Baltimore's community, thinking about the unique needs of a Black community, and also just the ways that journalism can both help and harm communities. When I got there, those officers that had had apprehended Freddie Gray, those officers were going to trial. And my editor at the time, Karen Hooper, asked me to cover those trials. And at first I was kind of like, I'm kind of a general assignment reporter. I'm not a courts reporter. Courts reporter is kind of like, that's their beat. They already know the folks at the courthouse. They know how this all works. That's not me. And Karen said, that's fine. We have other, there'll be other newsrooms there, the New York Times, the Baltimore Sun, that can do kind of like that court reporting daily beat. She said, I want you to more write about your experiences and reflections being in that courtroom. So I ended up writing pieces that kind of talked about, for example, one of the things that one of the officers' defense talked about in court was that, they had to throw him in the van in the way that they did because there was just this scary, violent crowd and the situation was out of control. And one of the things that I wrote about was that Freddie, like people knew him in his community. So when he was crying out in pain, people went and wanted to know what was going on. That happens in any community, anywhere on this planet. But because this is a poor Black community, them being human is demonized and almost used as justification. People said, the lawyers on the defending the officer said not to say he caused his own death, but. And to me, that was just a crazy thing to hear. So I wrote pieces kind of about perception and how perception is really what determines our lives in this country. So that stuff happened. I think we did a lot of good work. We were really excited about the work we were doing. And we got the call from the Baltimore Sun's ownership. We were owned by the Baltimore Sun that they were ending the paper. There was a lot of outcry from the community. People still wanted a voice like the city paper. They liked the Sun. The Sun was kind of, standard traditional news, but they also liked that alternative voice that was more skeptical of power, more kind of casual and approachable, also much more deeply rooted in the city's arts and culture scene, which Baltimore has an amazing arts and culture scene. That was still something that people wanted and needed. People approached at Brandon Soderberg, who was our editor-in-chief at the time, wanted to figure out how to buy city paper or start something new. The Sun would not allow the name to be purchased. Brandon found a publisher who lived in Baltimore but worked in DC and said, okay, well, I'm already publishing elsewhere in DC, but I love Baltimore and I want to help you start something else. And that's how the Baltimore Beat was born.
What a transformative set of experiences. It sounds like for the city, as we know, and for you personally to be a reporter. Was that tough for you to be told to go in and write about perspective in a way that it was impossible for that, I'm sure, not to be deeply personal as you're sitting there listening?
Yeah, I mean, I wrote about how Freddie Gray could have been, I'm from Annapolis, which is about 45 minutes from Baltimore, but I have cousins and family in Baltimore. He could have been my cousin. He could have been my nephew. So it's impossible to not feel that tie. And that's something else that I've talked about with journalism. Journalism has kind of been taught as this neutral, sterile thing. And it can't be for me, but it's also not for anyone. We are all humans. Journalism at its root is storytelling, and what we bring ourselves to whatever stories we tell.
When that idea was presented of let's start something new, did you have trepidation? Did you have excitement? What was the feeling that you had?
Well, it's interesting because the Baltimore Sun, when they ended City Paper, they kept me on staff for a while. They moved me over to the Sun, to the editorial side. I was on the Sun's editorial board. So that meant that I contributed to kind of the Sun's editorial statements collectively and also wrote my own op-eds. So I was working there. Brandon was working, trying to figure out how to keep that, alternative voice going. He had found the publisher. He came to me and was like, hey, Lisa, Brandon's a white man. He said, I could be the editor-in-chief of this thing, but I think there's enough white guys in journalism. Would you be interested in being the editor-in-chief? And that was shocking to me because I had never considered a leadership position. I'd always thought of myself as a journalist. I thought eventually I would, have a beat or I would figure out what my lane was and I would work for someone else always. And that was fine. Maybe write some books, but never have a leadership role in that way. And when he brought that to me, he gave me some time to think about it. And I thought about it, and I thought about how white journalism is. There's not many places in the United States that are led by Black women, Black people, but especially Black women. And so I felt like I kind of owed it to myself to at least try. I had never been in a leadership position in a newsroom, but I wanted to try. So I told him, yes, I will try and we'll figure this out together.
Well, and you've done more than try. I mean, this is an incredible living thing that you have created and brought to your community. And that is not a one-way newsroom. It is deeply entrenched in community and two-way conversation. And so tell me a little bit about that. It was, okay, here is this opportunity to start something new. But this wasn't a let's go recreate what City Paper was. You intentionally did some things a little bit different and have done some things different in terms of that connection to the community and what to me feels like a really deep, intentional focus on building and maintaining trust with your community too.
Yeah. So I've been able to really sharpen my vision over the years. So we started as a for-profit publication, just like most newspapers, making money through ad sales and things like that. And eventually, after 5 months, our publisher backed out and said, sorry, I don't have any more money. I can't do this thing. We reinvented the Beat a year later as a nonprofit. Then in 2020, a family foundation, a white family foundation, approached us and said, at this moment in 2020, when the pandemic is happening and disproportionately affecting the health of Black Americans, as people are out in the streets protesting the death of George Floyd, we feel called to do more. We feel like, we have this foundation, we've been giving out small piecemeal grants. We think that that doesn't do enough to address the harms that Black communities are facing. We want to give everything. So they gave us $1 million. And I think that money coming at a time that was so pivotal made me get really serious about what people needed, what people wanted, and also the ways that journalism as a whole was failing us. Um, One of those ways was the beat boxes. I'm sure we'll talk about those more, but those boxes started popping up around that time more because folks were losing their jobs because of the pandemics. So there were these community pantries and things like that popping up around the city. I saw the ways that information was not getting to people. Not just me, our team saw that. There were people that didn't know basic information about the pandemic. When you think about the race factor and George Floyd, this is a matter of life and death, and it always has been. But I didn't see journalism meeting the needs and really telling the story of what was happening with that. So it was really like this convergence, I think, in 2020 that made us say, like, we've been kind of complaining and talking a lot about the way that journalism doesn't quite fit the needs of a lot of people. This is a time where we really are seeing the real world effects of that failure. And now that we have this money, we can really try to do something about it. I don't think we can exist as a healthy society if everybody's not included in the conversation. We can't, the way that I was taught journalism was kind of a top-down approach. The reporter goes wherever, talks to the person, goes back to their newsroom and spits it back out to the community. That's, to me, already has been slowly not working. We are in an emergency right now, and we have to talk to people, like on a person-to-person basis. We can't think of it as mass communication. It has to start with small conversations and build to a greater thing. I feel like I'm a little bit rambling. I hope I'm not, but that's
You are not. You are not. Like, this is the message that literally everyone listening needs to hear because it transcends actually people who run newsrooms. What you are talking about is inherently the basis of community building. And there were two things I want you to talk about. Two, I'm going to call them strategies, but they are so much more than that. And it's the way you think about your drivers and the role that they play in that listening process and the beatboxes. And I'm not sure which one happened first, your community drivers or the beatboxes.
the boxes happened first. So we knew, so also City Paper always had kind of these iconic bright yellow boxes all around the city. City Paper was a weekly paper. When it came out, everybody knew to find those yellow boxes and get your paper. So when we got that money, we wanted to honor that and then also bring something else because again, we were like, we have to do more. We have to show up more. Just giving people a well-written story is not enough. There's so much great journalism happening that does not pierce the veil of like regular people and creating change. So we thought about those boxes. We reached out to OpenWorks, which is a community makerspace here in Baltimore. They helped us kind of figure out what those boxes would be, and those were in production. Then we were like, okay, we have this paper that we've told everybody is gonna come out. How are we gonna get it to everybody? In our first iteration, we had drivers. We just used like a driver company. We never saw them. They delivered the paper, and we would always get complaints from people that were like they weren't getting the paper. We would tell the drivers, okay, you guys are missing this place or that place. The drivers would be like, whatever. And they just consistently, it was a problem. So we knew it had to be something a little bit more homegrown. And so we reached out to Easy Jackson, who now is our director of outreach. Easy Jackson's born and raised in Baltimore City, knows the city like the back of his hand. Like you say an address, he knows exactly where that is. Also, because he's also been a organizer in Baltimore. So he's literally door knocked all over the city. So we brought him on and we said, okay, we're going to try to build this thing where we deliver our own papers. We put out a call and said, this isn't a lot of money, but if anybody's looking for a few extra dollars, we can pay you to pick up the papers and deliver them all across Baltimore every other week. We did not expect it to be a community building thing. Like that was a beautiful surprise. We launched August 10th, 2022. And that first Wednesday, we started seeing on Instagram all these different small businesses, because it's not just the boxes that get the papers. There's also coffee shops, small businesses, hospitals, community resource centers. They all get drop-offs of the paper too. All these people posting on Instagram, we have the beat, we have the beat. And then we're sharing these and we're noticing that people want the paper and they're like, I lived down the street from this coffee shop, which is like a small, mom and pop coffee shop. I've never been inside. I've never been in this space. I didn't know that this space existed in my community. And that was just such a beautiful thing to see. It was not planned at all. We thought the community building was going to mostly come from the boxes or the content of the paper. We have the same team of drivers 3 years later. No one's left. They're all still very committed. And they tell us about how now, the owners of shops will wait for them and say, oh my gosh, I'm so happy that you're here, when they drop them off at community centers, or I think there's some elderly high rises that we drop the paper off. They look for the community resource guide that we put in every issue. So they're excited to get the paper. And so it's just like, again, it's just something we did not plan, but it's been another way of making sure that we really show up in the community.
Right. Yeah. And sometimes the best ideas are just that, right? I mean, you couldn't have predicted the outcome, but what I love about this story, particularly at a time when I mentioned this in the piece I wrote too, right? When the paper boy is essentially extinct. There's no such thing anymore. That a simple act, really, of you knew you needed to deliver the paper. And so how to deliver the paper by simply extending an arm just a little further into the community and the impact that would have is remarkable. And so it didn't, I am sure it didn't require the vast majority of that $1 million to make that happen, but the impact that had far outweighs, right, the cost that you take on to do that. I just love how you do that. The beat boxes. One more thing I want you to stress about the beat boxes is not only are they hearkening back to the city paper boxes, but there is something unique in how they're built. There's kind of a top shelf, as I understand. Tell me a little bit about that.
So they both have, if you just walk up to the box and open kind of the front door, that's how you pick the paper up. If you lift the lid, there's a compartment where you can drop things off or pick things up. So we've had people kind of adopt these boxes in different communities around the city, and they've left things like water bottles, COVID tests, feminine hygiene products. Recently, someone stacked the box, took a picture, and tagged us on Instagram, and it was right before school started. So they put some composition notebooks and pens and erasers and colored pencils and things like that. So just different things that people need in the community, they can leave for them. In the winter, people will put hand warmers in there. And again, I think that it feels very corny to say, but I do think that people are intrinsically good. It feels especially crazy to say that at this political moment. It feels very Pollyanna-ish, but I do think that. But I think that we have to make it easy for people to be good. And for us, it's a small way of helping. Another thing that we did not expect, but has been so really meeting this moment, um, is I knew from the beginning that I wanted to have Narcan in our boxes and drug testing strips. We didn't have the capacity to do that because this is a thing that we are definitely still building until this year. So we partnered with an organization called Baltimore Harm Reduction, and all the boxes have Narcan and drug testing strips now. And that matters because, there's been reporting from the Baltimore Banner, another nonprofit news outlet here, about the increase in overdose deaths. That's still a major issue. And so that's a way that those are there. And also, our director of outreach, Easy Jackson, has had to actually use that on someone who was overdosing. We work out of an office near downtown Baltimore, near City Hall. One day we're in there working, and somebody who worked in that office came running in, and he was like, somebody is overdosing outside, like right now. And we have a box right outside of our office. So Easy ran downstairs, grabbed the Narcan, administrated it to the man, and he was brought out of that overdose. At the beginning of the year, I didn't think, that would be something that it would be really a spotlight on Baltimore about. Like that's a major issue right now in Baltimore. After the Banner's reporting, it's something that city leaders have been having a lot of conversation, like how do we address this in a better way? But because we were already positioned to meet that moment, we've already been able to support.
Talk about meeting a moment. I mean, this is so much more. You and I started by talking about a community newspaper, which it is. I mean, it is truly a life-saving service on so many levels as you think about how you're bridging community. And it strikes me that it all started from the response to and the experience of Freddie Gray's death, a highly politically charged experience in Baltimore. And I am certain in that moment, going back to that moment in that courtroom, it probably was really hard to imagine the future of what Baltimore could be as a place where community was coming together. And the role that you and your colleagues have played at the Baltimore Beat just should not be undervalued or dismissed, because it's a critical part of how your community has been building and strengthening and tightening those bonds that are there inside your community.
And I mean, in some ways, it's just echoing what the city already is. Baltimore has always been kind of an underdog. We were like DC's less fancy cousin. And so we've never been as resourced as some other bigger cities. And so folks have always had to rely on community. So again, it's like that was already there. We didn't invent that. Baltimore is a deeply community knit city. It's just helping that, supporting what already existed.
I love that. Right. There was so much already innately in the city. All right. Time for 2 more questions. So I said it at the top, and I'll say it again. I mean, clearly people think, and some data will show it, that local news is dying. You say the opposite. So tell me why. Tell me what you see in Baltimore that proves local news isn't dying, but it's the heart of a community.
Local news as we know it is dying, but there's so much potential there. I think the way that I was taught about news is that it's this thing local news is something that feeds the larger, national news. And national news is the best. The idea is that maybe you started a small newspaper and eventually you make it to New York or LA or DC. I think that is dying. And I think that that's good because it did not work and it did not serve communities. That's not how our nation works. Our nation works in small communities first. And so I think there's so much potential right now in local news. Um, I also get very frustrated because we're so small. I wish that I had assistants. I wish that we had a larger newsroom. Right now we have a managing editor. We have an arts and culture editor. We did have a news editor, but we promoted her to a managing editor. And we have Easy Jackson as our director of outreach. We have a team of drivers. We have a team of steady freelancers. That's it. We could get so much more done if we had a bigger staff. But having a smaller staff means that you really have to be focused on the details. And I really think about how being uncomfortable right now, because it is uncomfortable to be, I get sick and I miss like 2 weeks of emails and I'm still trying to fight back. But it makes you really look at the small details and build towards the future. I'm not always going to be as under-resourced as I am. We're not always going to be as a nation in this time of crisis. That's what happens. But are we prepared for when this time of crisis is over to have the thing that needs to happen then built and running for that world? And so I feel like, yes, what we know of news is dying. It first started with small newsrooms, but now it's, giant ones like CNN and MSNBC. They talk about, we see that they're losing audience, but there's so much that can be built in that space. I'm talking to you right now from a convening of Black women who run small newsrooms in Detroit, in Memphis, in where else? Indiana. And we're all talking and huddling and figuring out how we build to the future. Those conversations are happening among many people, among queer journalists, among indigenous journalists. So all of these things are happening. There's another world coming. And for me, it feels really good to be part of that.
Good, good. So tell the folks who are listening how they can become part of it too. How can they support Baltimore Beat or some of the other newsrooms that you just mentioned?
To support a large community of nonprofit news, because there is a community, look for organizations like Lion, Local Independent Online News, also INN, Institute of Nonprofit News. For the Beat, please, we're at baltimorebeat.com. Please read our work. Please share our work. Sign up for our newsletter. We are looking for small donors and large donors. One of the things that kind of happens and why we're so small is that it's still hard to convince folks that news that's thinking first of Black folks, of marginalized folks, so Black folks, non-Native folks, poor folks, it's hard to get that funded. And that's just true across nonprofit world. It's also hard for nonprofits run by people who look like me. So we are working at a deficit when it comes to money. We've been very blessed to have the support of some large donors like the Ford Foundation, the Democracy Fund, but we really need a lot more to sustain ourselves into the future.
For those who are listening, if you were moved by this conversation as I was, baltimorebeat.com, become a member. Small donation, large donation, it all matters to invest in this deeply community-driven idea and experience and service that is critically important, particularly in the world that we live in right now. So here's our little closing, and this is just for you, Lisa, as we're getting to know everyone who's showing up on the show this season. A couple rapid-fire questions for you.
Okay.
So since this is about hellos, goodbyes, and the space between, do you say hello with a hug or a handshake?
I would love to hug, but also not everybody's a hugger. So I take their temperature. If they want a hug, then I'll give a hug. If a handshake's better, then I'll do that.
What's your favorite language or way to say hello?
That's a really good question. I think by genuinely asking how people are. I feel like some people say it just kind of like it's interchangeable with hello, but I really want to know, like, how are you? I think sometimes people talk to me and they just want to start asking me stuff. So it means something to me when folks are like, how are you really? How are your kids? Like, how are your parents?
What's something you never leave home without?
My cell phone, unfortunately. There's no way that I can function without it.
Pretty sure that answer will win this season.
Yes.
And finally, to take us home in this big game of life, what is one thing you hope to leave behind?
The Baltimore beat in a better capacity. Like, there's so much work that I know that I will not even get to. I feel like my job is creating a very strong foundation so that the next person, who I really hope is a person born and raised in Baltimore City, has kind of the opportunity to soar even further than we ever could.
Lisa, it was so amazing to get some time with you today. I feel this kind of full body experience listening to you of what you've built, and the vision you have is both so big and so real, right? And you are achieving it every day in how your newsroom operates. So thank you for sharing some of that with us, particularly while you are on site with some of your colleagues. I appreciate you giving some time.
Thank you for seeing our work, because like I said, not everybody unfortunately sees the value of it. So it really means a lot that you do.
Happy to. All right. Well, thanks, and we'll talk with you soon.
Thank you.
And that brings us to the end of another episode of the Mission Forward podcast. What Lisa and her team are doing is the antidote to all of the divisiveness and the challenges that our country is facing in this moment. If you are looking for ways to build community, listen to this episode again. The solutions are right in front of you. If something about this show is sticking with you, I hope you will let me know. And remember this, wherever you're going, wherever you've been, and wherever you are right now, make the most of it. And I'll see you here next time on the Mission Forward podcast.
Thank you for listening today. And now a quick word from our sponsor, Positively Partners. Nonprofit leaders, when it comes to your organization's impact, the sky is the limit. But has HR become a limitation? As a leader in nonprofit HR solutions, our friends at Positively Partners are keeping the human in human resources with their signature service, Positively HR. Picture this. A fully outsourced HR provider who understands your unique needs and acts as an extension of your mission-driven team, freeing up your team's time and talent to focus on, you guessed it, moving your mission forward. With a 100% renewal rate among current clients and 95% of requests resolved within 24 hours, Positively HR saves you time, money, and compliance headaches. Let Positively HR lead on human resources so you can lead your mission forward. Say hello to a better HR solution at positivelypartners.org. That's positivelypartners.org.